The Houthis ought to have taken some time to reorganize. After declaring a ceasefire with the US, the terrorist organization had the opportunity to recover after being bombarded by American aircraft for almost 2 months. However, that isn't true. Rather, the Houthis launched an attack on Israel, and then Israel launched a missile strike that destroyed 2 important Houthi ports. Israel has sent the Houthis a scary warning, and the Middle East crisis has just flared up again after appearing to be abating. There will be more. On May 2 days before the US formally declared a ceasefire with the Houthis, it all began. The extremist organization determined that day was ideal for attacking Israel. This strike differed from the majority of Houthi attacks in the past. For starters, the Houthi missile managed to pass through. It landed close to one of the airport's main terminals after traveling all the way from Yemen to Israel's Ben Gurion airport. Israel reports that 4 people were hurt in the ensuing explosion, including 2 who were trying to flee to safety while air raid sirens sounded in the distance. The good news for Israel, at least, is that the Houthi attack did not result in any fatalities or major injuries. Following the raid, the Houthis said more would come. According to the group, it intends to use repeated strikes against Israel's airports to establish a complete aerial blockade that will stop Israeli commercial flights and possibly even combat jets from flying. The Houthis might have overplayed their hand. Israel pledged retaliation. Israel Katz, the nation's defense minister, responded with a threat. "We will strike anyone who strikes us 7 times more forcefully." Benjamin Netanyahu, the nation's prime leader, also claimed that the Houthi strikes are coming from Iran and connected them to the country. He threatened too. According to Netanyahu, Israel would react to the Houthi attack when it was time and would even reply to Iran whenever and anywhere we wanted. Ben Gurion, on the other hand, was briefly closed following the Houthi airstrike but soon reopened. Israel is upset with itself as well. These kinds of attacks are typically stopped in their tracks by its Iron Dome air defense system. It made an attempt. The US-made Terminal High Altitude Area Defense or THAAD batteries and Israel's Arrow air defense system tried to destroy the Houthi missile. Israel is still looking into why its renowned defense system was unable to thwart the Houthi rocket. Senior police commander Yair Hetzroni said that in addition to the casualties, the Houthi strike also created a crater that was tens of meters in diameter and tens of meters deep. A direct strike was scored by the Houthis. Israel pledged to strike back. Israel fulfilled that commitment on May 2nd. Amid allegations that the Houthis utilized both ports to move weapons, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, launched a series of airstrikes against the 2 important Yemeni ports of Hodeidah and Al-Salif. Israel launched a barrage of 35 missiles against the ports using 15 fighter jets from its air force. This was an explicit declaration of the IDF's intentions. They will retaliate with an even more potent blow than the 7 times more potent attack that Israel's defense minister pledged if the Houthis were to strike their land with a single missile. The IDF said Israel's bombardment was so strong that it will probably compel both ports to halt operations for at least a month. Additionally, Israel asserted that it had hit more central and international targets than the United States had a few weeks prior when it targeted the same ports. According to an IDF post on X, in the hours after the raid, Israel's strike struck the ports itself, affecting terrorist infrastructure, while the US attacks destroyed crucial Houthi fuel depots. The Houthis have not disclosed whether anyone was killed or injured at the port as a result of the Israeli retaliation attack as of the release of this video. Israel Katz took to X to explain why his nation launched the attack. As we stated, the Houthis will be dealt severe blows if they keep firing missiles against the state of Israel. As we have done with Daif and the Sinwars in Gaza, Nasrallah in Beirut, and Hania in Tehran, we will also go after terror leaders. We will also find and destroy Abdul Malik al-Houthi in Yemen. Katz raged, "We will use our own strength to protect ourselves from any adversary." In other words, Israel can strike the Houthis hard without the help of the United States. It can accomplish that on its own, even eliminating the group's leader if necessary. Additionally, according to the IDF, it warned everyone who worked at the Houthi ports that now was the time to complete their tasks, issuing many warnings on the eve of the strikes. The IDF once more issues a warning to anyone present at the ports to leave and avoid the area due to the Houthis' exploitation of these ports for terrorist activities. The IDF said in a statement that it would continue to prohibit any hostile action at these ports. Translation: there will be additional airstrikes soon. Everyone who works in Yemen's major ports should leave Dodge. The obvious question is raised by the fact that the most recent Israeli strikes occurred about 12 days after the Houthis stormed the Ben Gurion airport. Why didn't Israel react sooner? Who's to say it didn't react more quickly? Israel had previously attacked the Houthis in retaliation for the Ben Gurion strike, including the recent attacks at Hodeidah and Al-Salif. Indicating the IDF's intentions, it previously launched a missile attack on Yemen's capital, Sana'a, targeting the Houthis. In retaliation to the Ben Gurion attack, Israel's military said on May 6 that it had completely shut down Yemen's main airport, striking 3 commercial aircraft, the airport's departures hall, a runway, and a military airbase in one deadly blow. With this attack, which the Houthis say killed 3 people, Israel made it obvious that it intended to target more locations in Yemen. In a video statement, Netanyahu asserted that it was time to punish the extremist group responsible for its crimes and added that anyone who attacks Israel is responsible for his own blood. Israel even launched a round of at least 6 strikes on Hodeidah the day before, coupled with an attack on a Houthi cement facility that reportedly involved dozens of Israel Air Force or IAF fighter jets. The events of May 16 were not a warning. Following catastrophic US aerial attacks that have left the Houthis on the defensive, Israel is launching a series of airstrikes to permanently shut them down. The Houthis made a mistake. As they worked out a ceasefire with the United States, they somehow believed it was safe to attack Israel. The IAF recently demonstrated to the group that they are equally capable of carrying out airstrikes that cause harm to Houthi assets, as demonstrated by the United States during the previous 2 months. Therefore, it is evident that Israel has no plans to give in to the Houthis. Here's why the most recent attacks on Hodeidah and Al-Salif are significant though. The Houthis use both of these crucial ports to supply Yemen with weaponry and maintain control over its citizens. For the IDF, shutting down Hodeidah in particular is a huge victory. The port city has been one of Yemen's most significant commercial hubs since it came under Houthi rule in 2014. The port, which was formerly one of Yemen's economic lifelines, became a major hub for help coming into the nation from abroad when the Houthis took control of it. That status was used by the Houthis. 80% of Yemen's imports came from Hodeidah prior to the conflict between the Houthis and the Arab Alliance and the Yemeni government. Due to a Saudi-initiated embargo of Yemen's borders and airspace, it became the sole port through which aid and goods could enter Yemen as of 2018. It continues to hold this position today. The Houthis have authority over Yemen's populace if they control that port. A third of Yemen's population, or about 28 million people, rely on help to survive, according to The Independent. The country is on the verge of a full-blown famine, with 8 million of those 28 million living in food insecurity. The Houthis would love that. They have control over who gets aid and when because of Hodeidah. There are several uses for that control. The Houthis can obstruct aid from entering Yemen and then distribute it to whichever location they choose, thereby portraying themselves as the rescuers of the starving Yemeni people. Aid turns into propaganda for the extremist organization. As the Houthis try to utilize food and materials to further their objective, it is easy to conceal where they have actually come from. Naturally, the Houthis can starve out other parts of Yemen by using their hold on Hodeidah. Although they have forced Yemen's official government into exile and control the country's capital, the Houthis do not have complete authority over Yemen. They control the majority of the northwest region of the nation, from where they operate a de facto government that issues currency and levies taxes on citizens. But there is still a lot of opposition to the organization in the rest of Yemen, and the Houthis' hold over Hodeidah gives them a way to erode that resistance. Oh, then there are Iranian weapons to take into account. The Houthis' tight ties to Iran are the primary factor that allowed them to shoot a missile at Israel in the first place. The Houthis are frequently referred to as an Iranian proxy, as Tehran uses them to influence Middle Eastern geopolitics. Iran has been smuggling weapons to the Houthis since at least 2000. The majority of these weapons enter through Hodeidah and support the group's attacks on targets including Israel. There have been many of those attacks. Since October 2023, the Houthis have attacked more than 100 Western ships in the Red Sea and fired more than 100 missiles and drones on Israel, according to IMED. All of this is being done in favor of Hamas, another Iranian proxy, while Israel and the rebel organization fight in Gaza. By removing Hodeidah even for a month, Israel disrupts the flow of Iranian weapons and weakens the Houthis' hold on Yemen through the aid that enters the nation through its main port. Next up is Al-Salif. Al-Salif, which is home to the port of Salif, has a different function than Hodeidah. Al-Salif is one of Yemen's main exporting ports, and the former port gives the Houthis control over what enters Yemen. From Al-Salif, bulk salt is transported from Yemen to the rest of the globe, providing many Yemenis with a lifeline. Yemen exported almost 100 metric tons of salt in 2018 alone. By 2022, a large number of Yemenis had become dependent on this somewhat valuable resource. A group of 500 women were generating 20 to 30 tons of salt every 3 months, according to a 2022 Arab news story, with each bag selling for $12. Al-Salif continues to be the port from which the salt is shipped to Yemen's consumers, and those ladies receive 100 a month for harvesting the salt. There are many such activities in Yemen. Israel has closed the port that was crucial in ensuring that money continued to flow into Houthi coffers by removing Al Salif. It becomes evident why the port became a target for the IAF when you consider that it also receives bulk goods and food imports like wheat and corn. The two areas where Israel has struck the Houthis are quite painful. Aid entering Yemen has halted as a result of the May 16 bombings, which have also eliminated one of the Houthis' primary means of control over the populace. Additionally, they have prevented the Houthis from exporting one of their most valuable resources and made sure that Iranian weapons shipments into Yemen will take a lot longer to get into Houthi hands. Does this imply that Israel has eliminated the Houthis? Not at all. Both sides promise more attacks in the future and the combat will continue. The Houthis have indeed already acted on their vows of retaliation for the port attacks in Hodeidah and Al Salif. The Houthis said they fired 2 more missiles at the Ben Gurion airport on May 16, 2 days after the IAF strike. The Houthis' missiles from a few weeks before were more effective than those ones. It is suggested that the second Houthi missile missed its target, although the IDF claims to have intercepted one of the ballistic missiles the Houthis fired at 2 in the morning. Nevertheless, the strike accomplished at least part of the goals the Houthis had in mind. As the missiles hurtled toward Israel, air raid sirens sounded, forcing hundreds of thousands of civilians to spend the night in shelters. The Times of Israel reports that the Houthis have fired 35 missiles and Zine drones at Israel since March 18. These were just 2 more to join the total. Most of those missiles that make it to Israel are shot out of the sky and many of them have failed. However, the Houthis' message is unmistakable. Israel hasn't defeated the organization despite taking out 2 of its most crucial ports. The Houthis will continue to launch missiles and eventually the militant organization will reopen its port, guaranteeing a new flow of Iranian ammunition into Yemen for the Houthis to employ against Israel. Naturally, that is predicated on Israel not continuing to attack the Houthis. As Benjamin Netanyahu himself has stated, the likelihood is that it will. We once again accuse the Houthis of being merely a tool that Iran uses as it pleases, and Israel's Prime Minister warned that this was only the beginning following Israel's May 16 attack on Yemen's port. Netanyahu declared, "We will not sit by and let the Houthis hurt us. We will use more force against them, taking down their leadership and all the facilities that allow them to attack us." According to Hamda Salhut of Al Jazeera, this is not a mere threat. The correspondent, who is reporting from Jordan, said that since the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in 2025 collapsed, the Houthis have fired at least 34 different projectiles in Israel's direction. Israel's strategy going forward will be retaliation. According to Salhut, they will be carrying out these kinds of airstrikes for each missile that is fired. Consider the implications of that. After the Houthis fired a single ballistic missile at Ben Gurion on May 16, Israel commenced its attack. In response, the IDF launched around 30 missiles and 15 fighter jets at strategic Houthi ports. The Houthis launched twice as many missiles at the same airport on May 18. Although neither struck its target, it is reasonable to infer that Israel is now getting ready to launch an even more destructive airstrike in retaliation. The Houthis are still recovering from over 2 months of daily attacks on their infrastructure and people by the United States, so any tit-for-tat conflict can only cause them additional harm. In addition, there is the ceasefire between the United States and the Houthis to take into account. May 6, the US assault against the Houthis has ended, according to President Donald Trump's announcement. At a White House meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, Trump asserted, "The Houthis have made it clear that they no longer wish to fight, or at least they have told us so. They have given up because they simply don't want to fight, and we will respect that by stopping the airstrikes." Although Trump at the time didn't elaborate much on it, it seems that the United States is still adhering to that truce. The agreement was verified by Oman, which has been serving as a mediator in nuclear program talks between the United States and Iran, giving credence to the notion that Iran instructed the Houthis to cease their hostilities with the United States. The US claims that between mid-March and the truce, it targeted over Ain's null targets in Yemen, causing significant harm to the Houthis. Numerous individuals were also killed by some of those strikes. For example, an airstrike on a Yemeni prison facility 1 week prior to the ceasefire announcement claimed 68 lives. In Hodeidah, another raid on the Ras Izzar petroleum port resulted in 150 injuries and 80 fatalities. One must raise the obvious question, would the United States suddenly re-enter the conflict as a result of Israel's reinvigorated campaign against the Houthis? For a few reasons, it doesn't appear likely at the moment. The first is that the United States launched its airstrikes in retaliation for the Houthis, who were allegedly preparing to resume attacking Western commercial maritime ships in the Red Sea. According to the current truce, they aren't doing that at the moment, thus the United States won't be retaliating for Houthi attacks on Israel. Given what the IDF demonstrated on May 16, it probably thinks Israel is more than capable of handling such strikes on its own. The cost of the US airstrike against Yemen is the second argument, a substantial sum of money. It is reasonable to estimate that the United States spent more than twice that much by the time the truce was established, having already spent over $1 billion on the strikes by April year. During the combat, 2 F-18 Super Hornet fighter jets, each costing the United States $67 million, also fell from the aircraft carriers that housed them. The United States is unlikely to want to re-enter Yemen unless it can demonstrate that the costs involved are worth it. That investment is justified by the need to safeguard commercial transportation vessels. It doesn't matter if the Houthis fire a few missiles at Israel. Israel doesn't care about that. It has demonstrated that it is more than capable of continuing where the United States left off, and it has pledged to defend its territory from any Houthi attack, so more will follow. The strike on May 2nd was only the beginning. A few days later, Israel was retaliated against by the Houthis. Thus, expect the headlines to soon be dominated by reports of yet another Israeli strike in Yemen. However, how do you feel about Israel's assault on Yemen's 2 most vital ports? To what extent will these attacks harm Yemen's Houthis? And considering that Israel has threatened retaliation for the Houthis' missile attack on May 18, where do you believe it will target next? The growing shadow war throughout the Middle East took a new and perilous step with the Houthi strike on Israel. What started out as a civil war-related regional conflict in Yemen has now grown into a much larger conflict with worldwide implications. The Houthis' choice to target Israeli territory had far-reaching effects that extended well beyond the missile's path, leading to military warnings, diplomatic escalation, and a regional realignment of alliances. Examining the players and their underlying motivations is essential to comprehending the seriousness of this development. Since 2015, the Iranian-backed Shia militia known as the Houthis, formerly known as Ansar Allah, has dominated a sizable portion of Yemen. They have always framed their conflict in terms of religion and ideology, claiming to be fighting against Israeli aggression and Western imperialism. A major escalation, however, occurs when missiles or drones are launched directly against Israel, turning them from a local rebel organization to a proxy actor in the larger Iran-Israel conflict. This strike wasn't the only one, with Iran-backed militias growing more confident in the wake of the Israel-Hamas conflict and ongoing Israeli operations in Gaza. It coincided with increased tensions throughout Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. Iranian officials have made it clear that their regional allies will react according to their own rules if the West is unable to keep Israel in check. The strike by the Houthis must be interpreted in this light, as an attempt to show their commitment to Tehran, announce their relevance, and make Israel's strategic calculations more difficult. From a military standpoint, the hit was symbolic rather than intended to result in the greatest number of casualties or damage to infrastructure. According to reports, the Houthis targeted southern Israeli airspace using low-cost ballistic missiles or medium-range drones that may have been modified from Iranian designs. Israel's multi-layered defense system, which consists of the Arrow, David's Sling, and Iron Dome systems, intercepted them. Even while there was no bodily harm, the psychological and political effects were felt right away. First, the strike made Israel recognize a new southern threat channel. Israel has traditionally kept a careful eye on Syria and Lebanon, but historically the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden have received less attention. The attack by the Houthis demonstrated that Israel has to expand its defenses, further taxing its already limited military capabilities. Additionally, it created concerns in Israel's marine security, especially with regard to Eilat, its naval gateway and strategically important southern port. Second, it prompted a prompt and strategic reaction from the larger Western alliance as well as from Israel. 24 hours after the assault, the US Central Command declared that air and naval forces would be moving closer to Yemen's shore. While surveillance drones started circling the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, a carrier strike group was sent to the Gulf of Aden. It was evident that Washington would not allow Iran's proxies to escalate unchecked, particularly if doing so would put the area at risk of becoming involved in a wider conflict. In the background, the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates increased their intelligence collaboration. Despite not having official alliances, these nations' shared fear of Iranian expansionism has sparked an increase in security cooperation. Internal discussions were placed in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. Although the Houthis continue to pose a direct military threat to both countries, any conflict involving Israel has the potential of sparking unrest among Arab populations that support the Palestinian cause. As a result, regional governments had to walk a tightrope between the necessity of containing the Houthis and the possibility of internal backlash. It's interesting to note that Saudi Arabia's reaction was more muted than in previous years. Riyadh, once the main enemy of the Houthis, has moved toward de-escalation, particularly in the wake of recent peace negotiations sponsored by China and Oman. Although they did not immediately threaten military retribution, Saudi officials denounced the bombing. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's focus on domestic reforms and his apprehension about being drawn back into a protracted conflict, particularly one that sets Arab factions against one another over Israeli interests, may be the reasons for this prudence. The Houthis Houthi assault served as a test and a message for Iran. Tehran aimed to test the boundaries of Western deterrence by inciting the Houthis to attack Israel. Would the United States use force to intervene? Would Israel strike Iran directly in retaliation? Would resistance to Tehran and support for Palestine cause Arab states to split? These were the questions of strategy. Additionally, Iran might gauge the response without running the risk of full-scale conflict by permitting a relatively small-scale strike. It has yielded mixed outcomes thus far. Israel reportedly stepped up its air campaign against Houthi assets in Yemen, but it did not strike Iran directly. Suspected drone storage, radar installations, and communication hubs in Sada and Al Hudaydah were the targets of precision strikes. The strikes were defended by the IDF as preemptive and compliant with international law. However, humanitarian groups' reports of civilian deaths in Yemen rekindled discussions about proportionality and the dangers of collective punishment around the world. At home, the assault galvanized Israelis, warning them that their adversaries today encompass not only Hezbollah and Hamas but also a network of transnational militants that can penetrate far into Israeli territory. Calls for greater defense spending and closer collaboration with the United States and Gulf allies brought together political forces that had previously been split on judicial reforms and domestic policy. Both hawks and doves in Washington put more pressure on the Biden administration. Fearing a regional conflict that would divert American interests in Europe and Asia, some senators called for rapid reprisal against Iran's Quds Force agents, while others advocated moderation. In a well-crafted statement, President Biden denounced the Houthi action and reaffirmed America's commitment to protecting Israel while advising all sides to refrain from actions that might spark a wider confrontation. The international community as a whole responded with alarm. Russia and China urged all sides to exercise patience, while Western countries denounced the strike and the UN Security Council called an emergency session. While expressing solidarity with Israel, European powers, particularly France and the UK, also underlined the need to solve Yemen's humanitarian catastrophe and the risks of overreacting. The incident has rekindled debates about the nature of contemporary proxy warfare among strategic circles. Like Hezbollah and Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, the Houthis are a new type of military force since they are ideologically driven, have state-sponsored weapons, are integrated into the civilian population, and may escalate a conflict asymmetrically. Their acts cast doubt on established military theories by obfuscating the distinctions between proportionality, deterrence, and sovereignty. The Houthi threat also emphasizes the necessity of new doctrines and technologies to combat drone warfare at the operational level. The Houthis have been able to mass-produce their own UAVs, some of which are equipped with GPS-guided strikes, radar evasion, and long-range flight capabilities thanks to Iran's gift of drone technology. Even though Israel was able to intercept them, other, less prepared countries still face a risk. NATO and its regional allies are therefore increasing their investments in AI-driven threat detection networks, microwave weapons, and counter-UAS systems. The concern for the future is not if the Houthis would attack again, but rather how regional actors will react if they do. Yemen continues to be a hotbed of proxy conflict, and escalation is always a possibility unless a long-term ceasefire is achieved. The Houthis have demonstrated their willingness to launch symbolic attacks that are far more powerful than their actual geopolitical impact. The world is now watching, regardless of whether their next objective is in Saudi Arabia, Israel, or even the shipping channels in the Red Sea. Furthermore, the true battlefield in this new era of dispersed warfare is not usually a physical area, rather it is perception, response, and the imperceptible boundaries between restraint and escalation. For more videos covering the most recent developments in the Middle East crisis, the war in Ukraine, and other armed crises worldwide, please subscribe to my channel and leave your comments in the comments.